Let's talk about one of my favorite accessories on the KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, the CLS chain oiler. Let's talk about one of my favorite accessories on the KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, and that's the CLS chain oiler. I had the chain oiler installed now for the past 3 years. I've almost put 50,000 kilometers on the chain oiler with this bike, and today I'm going to talk to you about how easy it was to install, what I like, what I dislike about it, and if I would buy it again. Before we get into the specifics of the CLS chain oiler, just a little recap on chain oilers in general. Now there's two major different kinds. There's the electronic ones that use a pump that pump the oil onto the chain, and there's ones that work with negative pressure. They're usually cheaper than the older models. This CLS chain oiler is one that has a pump, so it's on the upper end of the price spectrum, and it compares with something like Scott oiler, which is probably better known to the rest of the world. Now it was between those two chain oilers when I had to make my choice, and the reason why I chose the CLS over the Scott oiler was because it had a smaller display like this, not such a large display. That was one major reason, I have to say. Also, it comes in modules, which makes it a lot easier to install, especially install it for hidden from view, and it uses less oil. At least I was promised to use less oil, which I can attest to. That was the main reason why I like this oiler. Now when it comes to the installation of a chain oiler, it is not really that difficult. You just have to bring a little bit of time. It seems a bit daunting if you don't do a lot of manual installation on your bike just to get all these parts hooked up and connected, but actually there's very good online tutorials on YouTube on how to do it. So if you want to get your head around it, I can recommend watching a few of those. I think they're actually by CLS, and they install the CLS oiler on a KTM. It's not as difficult as you might think it is. You just need a little bit of time because some of the work is quite fiddly to do, but I found it relatively easy. Also, having the different modules makes it really easy to just kind of fit the little components anywhere we have space. Now, I installed my chain oiler under the passenger seat. Even though we have that coal canister in there, there's still enough room to put the little pump in there and the little control unit that you can put in there. Also, it's very easy to access battery power from there because the battery sits under the seat. The only thing you have to wire up front is that little control unit that you see on the handlebar. It is a bit fiddly if you don't want to remove the tank of getting that cable from the front to the back end. I used a little wire, just a little lead wire, to then get the wire back to the control unit. Took a bit more time than doing it without the tank installed, but I was able to do it relatively easily without much prior experience. So it's relatively easy to install. Once it's installed, you have to kind of fine-tune it, get used to what you set on your dial and how the drip steep works. Make sure that the little needle is on the rear sprocket correctly so that it drips the oil. So it's a little bit of playing around with it. I usually have it set to 3 or 4 usually, and it goes all the way up to, I think, drip speed of 9 or 10 or something, and then there's higher drip speeds when it rains that you can just bring up the oil a little bit when you're in wet conditions or in dusty conditions. Most of the time I just keep it at 3. It works really fine. Now, the benefit of having a chain oiler, there's two major benefits to it. First, it just takes the regular maintenance out of it. You would think there's still some maintenance you have to do, but you don't have to oil the chain as frequently manually, especially when you're on tour. That's one thing that I didn't want to do, is oil the chain. Best time to do it is right after you ride the bike. The chain is still warm, and you spray a little bit of oil on it and give it some time to rest, rather than doing it in the morning before you leave on your bike and all that oil kind of comes splashing off your chain again. Now, I didn't really want to do all that, and it was a major reason to buying a CLS. It's just for convenience reasons. It's just more convenient of not having to do any of the oiling. Plus, you don't have to bring that extra oil spray or something. That small 100 milliliter container is good for almost 10,000 kilometers. So that's all it takes. It's all the oil you need for 10,000 kilometers. Wow. This is the first real day that people are taking their bikes out. It's still the end of February, and it's 17 degrees today after we've had minus 10 just a week ago and lots of snow. So it's an absolutely crazy weather change. Everyone's out with their bike that has their bike registered throughout the year. Anyway, main reason for me for the chain oiler was convenience, and it really does that on tour. I really don't have to worry much about it. Now, the other reason is that it supposedly makes your chain last longer with sort of frequent lubrication. Now, I can't really attest to that, but it's not because the chain oiler hasn't worked well. It's because there is some maintenance that you still have to make sure that happens. You have to keep the chain clean enough that you don't plug up that little jet that comes out that drips the oil speed. Now, on our last tour in France, I wasn't paying that close attention to what the chain oil was doing. You kind of get lazy, you know that you keep forgetting looking at the chain, and that's something you should be doing. You should regularly check if the chain still gets lubricated, because if that little nozzle gets plugged up with dirt, then your chain won't get oil. And that's exactly what happened to me, and probably prematurely killed my chain, because I was running without lubrication on a very hot day at very high speeds on the Autobahn. And as you can see in the pictures, it doesn't look very pretty. It got really dry. It also had little sort of rust particles that would come off of it, and I would have all that sort of red dust on the inside of my rim. And the chain got quite a bit longer because of the heat. It was heating up quite a bit. So it really just kind of destroyed my chain on my very last day of riding Autobahn back from my France trip back to Berlin, because somehow I just didn't see that the chain oil wasn't getting on the chain. So you still have to pay attention to that, and you can still ruin your chain that way. But other than that, and it's not the chain oiler's fault, it's just you have to pay attention. Other than that, I'm quite happy. It hasn't really failed me before that or after that, because I make sure that the chain is clean enough, especially if you start riding off-road. There's quite a bit of sand and dust that still builds up, so you do have to make sure that you take paper cloth something and just wipe the rear sprocket off so that the oil can actually make its way to the chain. Yeah, so when it comes to usability, I'm quite happy with the chain oiler, and I would buy it again in a heartbeat. It's one of the best accessories I have on the bike, because it just takes the headache out of keeping the oil changed. Anyway guys, if you found this useful, smash the like button. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Ride safe and stay awesome.
Take me back.